Hey, welcome back to the interview segment of the Polite Society podcast powered by the Firearms Policy Coalition, where this is our special deep dive show. We're talking about the NRA, about the issues going on with the NRA. Joining us again, I am very pleased to talk to Rob Pincus. Rob with SaveThe2A.org. Rob, thanks for joining us, man.
Great to be here, Paul. I appreciate you guys taking some extra time on this topic because some of these issues are very complex and can't just be reduced to a 1 or 2 minute soundbite.
Yeah, exactly. So let's get started right, and you're going to be the first interview segment on this show. Let's when I started getting extremely concerned, I was concerned before the NRA annual meeting, but when the NRA annual meeting happened, and the day after the exhibition closed, they had the board of directors meeting. They had the public meeting the last day of the show, and then they had the board meeting the next day, and all of a sudden it went behind closed doors, and it went, well, Wayne LaPierre was elected unanimously. That's when I knew there was some serious stuff going on. But you were onto it even before that.
Well, a lot of us have been, sort of onto some of the existing problems at the NRA for a long time. I mean, Jeff Knox has been talking about this for decades, going back into the 90s when the Wayne LaPierre regime was installed. I've certainly been pretty animated about it and vocal about it probably for 5 to 6 years. And other people have been certainly, getting on board or being more willing to talk about these problems openly. And that all really did come to a head at the NRA annual meeting this year, spurred on by a lot of revelations in the mass media and, of course, the actions of then President Oliver North talking to Wayne LaPierre in a very direct manner about what he felt was the need for Wayne LaPierre to step down.
Yeah, and we all know how that turned out. The Oliver North went away, as well as, I'm having a brain fart here, the gentleman who was reading the letter. He's a NASCAR team owner. Yeah.
Richard Childress. Yeah, so Richard Childress stepped out of line to be president. Oliver North stepped down as president, failed to continue his duties, is the way most people described it, did not run for a second term as president. Now, he hasn't stepped down from the board. And what's interesting is he actually received a letter from the secretary of the NRA requesting that he step down from the board. And he, through his lawyers, refused to. Pete Brownell resigned, the former president, prior to Oliver North, from the board. But Childress and North are still there, but they're non-participatory, which, there's good and bad there. I'm glad that they're not bowing down to the intimidation and leaving. But at the same time, if they're not going to be vocal and participate, I understand neither one of them will be at the board meeting in September, then they really are, kind of trying to keep a foot on both sides of this battle.
Absolutely. Well, and we've had 3 resignations this past week. Tim Knight and I'm trying to remember. Goodness, and I'm
Sean Maloney and Esther Schneider.
Right.
And essentially, we've had 4 resignations in a way because Adam Kraut, who a lot of people put a lot of faith in to come in and try to be part of the reform effort, he immediately declined the seat, which, is a de facto resignation as he was offered the position. He said, thanks, but no thanks, for a lot of good reasons. I actually published an article at the blog at SaveThe2AO.org explaining why I don't blame him for not taking the seat. But at the same time, I do sort of consider that a 5th resignation now.
Yeah. So before we go on, there's a video we're going to be playing for the people that are watching this on video on Facebook. We're going to be playing a video here in a little bit, but you've been SaveThe2A has set up petitions for life members, for voting members of the NRA, and wanting to get some changes coming about in the September Board of Directors meeting. And when we were talking just before we started recording, you've had amazing response from that. You got more than double of what you needed?
We did. We got more than double the number that we needed. Now, I'm the first to say, hey, the number that we need is a relatively low bar with a 5.5 million member organization. But what people need to remember is that we not only did we double the requirements, we doubled it just in a matter of a few weeks. We had about a month to collect the signatures on the petition. And this petition, by the way, is one to change the bylaws of the NRA and require attendance from the directors at the board. And we can talk about why that's really important, but it is definitely something that I think most people who are paying attention to the NRA realize that if the board members aren't participating, if they aren't showing up, and if in fact the board isn't even requiring them to show up, that's a sign of trouble right there. And we vote these people in, that we're expecting that they're going to represent the members' interests. And if they don't show up to the meetings, obviously, well, that's part of the reason that we are where we are today. So we had an overwhelming response. We had it very, very quickly. We actually were still collecting petitions, still having petitions come in to this day, obviously, as people get them straggling in. But even after our cutoff date, at our cutoff date, we had more than double. We had actually made the required number of petition forms. We had received the required number and some insurance within 2 weeks of putting those petitions up online.
So let's talk about having NRA board members required to be at the meetings. Marion Hammer, I guess she's the president now. She hasn't been to a board meeting in years.
Right. Well, Carolyn Meadows is the president.
That's right.
Marion Hammer was the president in the 90s when Wayne LaPierre was essentially, solidified as the executive vice president for apparently as long as he wants to be, according to Marion Hammer. She's the controversial mouthpiece, I guess, for the old guard on the board. And it's amazing how often she speaks out, given that she doesn't participate very much in the actual ongoings, and she certainly doesn't like to interact with the membership of the NRA.
Right. So besides, is there anything that your petition, the main focus of the petition is to require board members to attend meetings? Is there anything else that is addressed in that petition?
Well, what's interesting is, of course, you have to be very specific on the bylaws and on the petition movement. So we've got the 5 points of reform at Save the Second. We've talked a lot about them. They are require attendance. They are make the board smaller so that it's more manageable and more effective. They are to they include putting term limits on the board members. And then the two that are less specific in terms of bylaw changes, one is to refocus the NRA specifically on gun rights issues, which is a systemic and strategic change as opposed to sort of the big picture of conservative politics. And then the last one is to make the membership engagement more oriented towards education and the motivation of grassroots activities as opposed to just rhetoric, fear-mongering, and of course, the ubiquitous asking for donations that we've seen over the last decade. Largely, those communications issues have been changed already because of the loss of NRA TV. Because of the lawsuits with Ackerman McQueen, the NRA has lost NRA TV. And Wayne LaPierre, in talking about the loss of NRA TV, even spun it as listening to the members, including the messages from Save the Second, obviously, saying that we wanted the NRA TV to get away from a lot of the political rhetoric and the identity politics and get back to just talking about guns. And of course, that's now part of the storyline, but obviously that wasn't the choice that Wayne or the NRA made. That was Ackerman McQueen's choice to shut down the Project NRA TV because of the issues between the two entities. So going back to the petitions that we potentially are going to put out there could address any or all or even other issues in the future. But for the board of directors meeting in September, we wanted to focus on what we thought was the most important one, and that was the attendance policy for board members, for the actual directors to participate, and then thereby be held more accountable to the individual members who can reach out to them, and they can't say, well, gee, we didn't know, because they were required to be at the meetings from this point forward. We're also working with some of the directors. We were working with a couple of the directors who resigned, unfortunately, and that sort of put a dent in some of our plans. But we're working with many other directors as well to propose other bylaw changes related to our points of reform at the September meeting.
One of the big things I think is the problem with the NRA is the power in the NRA is centered around Wayne LaPierre. And when you get outside that very, very tight little circle, the power is very diffused. I believe it takes, the board must vote by, if Wayne LaPierre were to be forced out, I think the board has to vote at 75% of 75 members. And then it goes to an executive board, and they have to vote 75%. of, I don't remember how many, I think it's like 30 members is on the executive board. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's going to be a very difficult challenge if it has to come that he's forced out for somebody other than the state of New York or Washington, D.C., who are trying to do it through legal channels to do that.
Yeah, I think it's almost impossible. And in fact, I've lobbied against really even trying that tact. I think there's two things to remember. One, yes, you've mentioned all the structural and strategic hurdles to getting the members to be able to initiate a recall that removes Wayne LaPierre. But the second, and I think more important issue here, is that we can't make this about Wayne LaPierre. Wayne LaPierre could have, quietly snuck out the back door 2 or 3 years ago after the Trump election, claimed victory, walked away with the suitcase full of a golden parachute and all the money that he's gotten, along the way, and just simply installed somebody else as a successor who would have continued the same exact failed strategies and structural issues inside of the NRA, and we'd be fighting the same fight, but it might just get pushed down the road a little bit. In some ways, it's actually good that Wayne LaPierre did not step down, that amidst other changes and amidst other concerns, he now has become the focus of this, but there really are much bigger structural and strategic issues the NRA is facing that need to be addressed. So we don't want to make it, I think it's Save the Second, it's safe to say, and certainly I don't want to make this a personal issue with Wayne. If Wayne left tomorrow, but we're replaced, let's say, by the very controversial Josh Powell, we'd be in at least as much of a troubled position as we are now, if not worse. So we have to be really careful about making the focus about him. The recall issues, it's interesting. Even some of the directors have been looking at the recall issues and the lack of confidence issues that they could bring up internally. And one of the interesting things was a change recently made to the bylaws, which would, instead of requiring a relatively low number of petitions from voting members, would now require over 7,500 voting members to sign the petition to have a lack of confidence recall against Wayne LaPierre or any officer of the NRA. And that certainly changes the bar quite a bit from what it used to be. There's been many insulating moves made by the Wayne LaPierre regime over the last 20 years, but especially in the last handful of years, to make it harder and harder for them to be forced out by the directors or by the members. The reality is this is going to change from the outside. And as you alluded to, it's either going to change because of regulatory action, taking away the nonprofit status of the NRA, indictments because of potential criminal activity, or preferably it's going to change because of motivated American gun owners. And I think the easiest way that we can affect change is defunding the NRA. And that means not paying the annual membership dues, certainly not contributing to the Friends of the NRA banquet or any other fundraiser that they're running, and putting pressure on those major donors, including some of the firearms companies and firearms industry companies that are major donors. Because when the money dries up, you'll see these people jumping ship. They'll get out of the way. We'll be able to reform the NRA and have a stronger advocate for Second Amendment rights. They're the largest one on earth, but right now they're not very effective because of these internal issues.
Right. Now, I want to touch on that defunding the NRA a little bit. I've said several times, and I still believe this, that if you are an annual member and you've been around for 5 years, don't stop your annual membership because you get to vote on the board, and that's important. Now is not, I don't think, the time that I'd be buying a lifetime membership, and if I weren't a 5-year member, I don't know that I'd continue.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not encouraging that. And I think, it's a roll of the dice. If you're continuing to pay for an annual membership, we know the votes really aren't that important, right? Between the way they stack the nominating committee, the way they stack the ballot. We just saw 3 directors resign. I talked about how Adam Kraut not taking a seat is a de facto resignation. Pete Brownell, who a lot of people put a lot of faith in, who stepped aside from his second term as the president, also now has resigned. It's becoming more and more obvious that the directors who really want to see change aren't able to affect that change from the inside. So if the directors aren't able to change anything, how much is a vote for a director really worth? Yeah. So if someone's paying $35 in or $40, $50 in every year just to have a vote that is almost meaningless, I don't think they're winning. I would say if you have a life membership or higher, and like, for example, I have a life membership. I'm not renouncing my membership. I'm going to keep my voting rights. I'm going to keep my vote in there for what it's worth. But at the same time, I would not be paying the $40, $50 a year to have an annual membership for that vote. I think you have a much stronger message and bigger effect by not paying and sending them a letter and telling all your friends that maybe they shouldn't be paying in either.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm I'm going to switch gears here. The next thing we're going to be doing a video that Save the 2A put out. Do you is there any preface to this, or do you want me just to roll with the video and we'll talk about it after it's done?
The only thing I would say is this is the second in a three-part series of videos related to the petition drive and the success of the petition drive, and people can see the other videos at our YouTube channel, Save the Second YouTube. They can find that. But yeah, I think this video sort of speaks for itself in terms of what the contained message is.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and roll that video. We'll be right back in about 2 minutes, 11 seconds.
We are Save the Second. Save the Second was formed to represent the voice of American gun owners, specifically American gun owners who are current, former, or potential future members of the National Rifle Association that are concerned about the problems facing the leadership, the board of directors, and the entire organization. These problems are a direct result of dysfunction, financial malfeasance, and a failure to oversee the employees of the NRA by the board of directors. We want the board of directors to be more accountable. We want the leadership in Fairfax to listen to NRA members. We want them to be better representatives of American gun owners. We want the systems and strategies of the NRA to be stronger, and we want the NRA itself to be something that more American gun owners can be proud of. We are currently in the middle of a petition campaign that's designed to make attendance mandatory for all directors at board of directors meetings. There's a directors meeting coming up in September in Alaska. We hope to have this on the agenda. We hope to have the directors that are present vote on whether or not they think themselves and other members should be held accountable for attendance at the board meetings. It's a well-known fact that many members, including members who are well paid by the NRA as lobbyists and in other ways, are not attending board meetings. When they don't attend board meetings, they don't participate, they can claim ignorance, and they can't be held accountable by the members. Join us in asking for the directors to do their jobs. We've been taking in petition forms from all over the United States, from Maine to Southern California, from the tip of Florida all the way up to the Pacific Northwest, and all throughout the middle of the country. American gun owners care about a stronger NRA. Save the Second cares about a stronger NRA. We're not trying to destroy it, we're just trying to fix it. Help us make these reforms happen. You can learn more at savethe2a.org. You can look at our YouTube channel, you can look at our Facebook channel. You can see what's being said by the directors that want change, by the leaders in the firearms community that are withholding funds, by the members who are resigning their membership, or simply saying they're not going to pay in anymore. Help us save the second. Visit savethe2a.org. Support a stronger NRA.
Okay, very cool. Come back to your face instead of a blank screen on the feed. What I get out of the video is, and especially what's really, for those that are listening on podcast that only got to listen, that didn't see, the entire video is basically someone flipping through envelopes of petitions that have been sent back. And 2 minutes of very quickly flipping through these envelopes, you've gotten tremendous response. Let me ask, the requirements, we said you were over double. Isn't it a percentage of the votes that were cast in the last election that have to be collected for the petition to go through? Am I right there?
That is not on this one. There are some petition requirements that are that level, and that's that 7,500 number level. The petition for a proposed bylaw change to get on the agenda at a board meeting is 250. So what you saw in there, that was probably about 150 to 175 separate envelopes. And of course, in those envelopes, sometimes there are multiple signatures on any given form, right? So there may be some people had collected up to 8, 9, 10, 12 of their friends that were voting members on the forms. So what we wanted to show there was the return addresses, and I've seen return addresses literally from Maine down to West Palm Beach, Florida, where I am right now, all the way out to Oregon, down to San Diego, California, and even Honolulu, Hawaii was on one of the return, address stamps. So it really is nationwide. I mean, and every state in between. So every corner of the country and up to Alaska and out to Hawaii participated in this, and it's been really a bit humbling to see how quickly and how much diversity there was. It wasn't like somebody went to one gun show and collected 100 signatures in Oklahoma. it really was a true grassroots effort. And I think that's important to remember that, we did start with Save the Second with a petition drive. That was our first public initiative because we thought that it spoke to the grassroots nature of the organization. And Anthony Garcia, our president, he was adamant. And like I said, I was not completely on board with that being the best first move. I thought getting some directors on our side and moving that path would be the best way to do our first initiative reform. And Anthony was adamant, having been involved in the recall efforts in Colorado after Sandy Hook, being involved in other grassroots efforts. Ron Carter was right there with him, and they educated the rest of the board about how they thought this should go. And we obviously, once we decided on a path, we all, turned that direction and moved in that direction as a group, and it was incredibly successful. And I was really humbled by the response.
Very cool. I'm going to switch gears here a little bit. It's been reported this past week by our own John Richardson, and I heard it independently, separately as well, that the NRA, and I've heard different versions of it, but I've heard the one thing for sure is there's no longer insurance for the board of directors. And I'm wondering, I have no special insight myself, but I have to wonder if maybe some of the board members stepping down recently, that might have something to do with it.
Well, I don't know specifically. I've heard the same rumor. I don't know specifically whether or not that's true. I do know that the policy was set to expire on August 1st. I don't know if the policy was renewed or replaced after that date. I think that what definitely I can say is that having talked to a lot of directors and heard from a lot of directors, both public statements and some private statements, that they are all concerned about legal issues right now. And the only ones maybe who aren't concerned about legal issues are the ones who never go to meetings and don't participate. Carl Malone and Tom Selleck might not have any idea what's going on. But even Marion Hammer, who doesn't go to meetings, knows enough to know that there are concerns with legal issues right now. And those legal issues are varied. There's potential lawsuits, potential class action lawsuits, even from the membership for them failing to do their duties to the members. There's potential lawsuits from donors. There are individual directors who are worried about being sued by the NRA because they've spoken out against the leadership, and they're worried about being accused of some kind of wrongdoing as board members based on the agreements they have with the NRA. And obviously, they're all worried about, especially the ones on the financial committees, are very worried about the potential legal ramifications of the investigations in Washington, D.C. and New York, potential criminal indictments. So there's a lot of issues that are very, concerning for the NRA, for individual members, and certainly for the directors. I think that's the reason you see some directors, sort of pretending they don't know this is going on. I think there's a difference between a Carl Malone, who was interviewed, and he spoke to the Washington Post and sort of said, wow, really? If that's all going on, that's pretty bad. And I believe genuinely that he really has not been paying attention, has no idea what's going on. On the other hand, there are other board members who certainly are tied into the industry, who know exactly what's going on, who aren't commenting, and that is a concern. I'm really, in fact, if I'm disappointed about anything, I'm disappointed about some of those board members who are very active in the community, who are very active on social media, but who haven't commented on the issues. And in fact, some who have gone as far as to say, "Oh, I don't get involved in that. I'm only involved as a board member for the good stuff."
Right. I do what my little committee does, and that's my entire involvement.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are coming up on the time we have allotted, and I don't want to take up all your day. But if I could, people that want to know more, I believe it's the website is savethe2a.org, right?
Yep, savethe2a.org. We also have a Twitter account. We have the Instagram account. We have been posting a lot of videos to the YouTube. And what I really like about the YouTube channel is that each individual board member, there's 5 of us on the board, and we all have a little different perspective and a little different voice and a little different emphasis. We have a diverse background amongst the board members, and you're getting to see and hear from each individual board member about what they feel is important or a specific part of the message. So I really do like what's going on in our YouTube channel. And then, of course, our Facebook page is incredibly active. That's the hub. We post a lot of articles to the blog. We post the videos to YouTube. They all get shared at the Facebook page. And there's also a Facebook discussion group now for friends of Save the Second, where people can get more involved in those in-depth group discussions that I just think it's a great way to use the internet. So not just a comment on something we've said, but a group discussion for like-minded and concerned American gun owners.
Yeah, I think that could be very valuable. We have a we have a Facebook group just for listeners of our show, and some of the discussions in there are incredibly insightful. So I imagine I'm going to have to myself look up that Facebook group and join that. That sounds like a great place to get additional information.
Yeah, it's and again, I like the fact that it's participatory. Participatory again, as a grassroots organization, it's trying to represent some of the angst and concern. Not just, and a lot is made about the NRA members having a voice, and as I said, I fear that even the NRA voting members really don't have much of a voice internally. So I like to think that Save the Second is helping with that representation, because we know that the directors are listening to us. We know that Wayne LaPierre and the executive officers are listening to us and paying attention to what's going on. We see it in the feedback. We see it in even Carolyn Meadows using the phrase "Save the Second" in some of her communications recently. We know that they're listening. So if we can help represent that NRA member, or maybe the former NRA member, or even the potential future NRA member, I think it's really important.
Absolutely. Well, as I said, we're coming up on the end of the time we have allotted. You're going to be coming back early next month to be a guest as a regular part of the show rather than one of these deep dives. I don't have my calendar up in front of me, but I believe that's scheduled just before the board meeting, right?
It is.
I am really curious as to see what's going to be changing between now and then. This episode will be releasing the second week of August, and I'm things are, I think, have a potential to really move in a positive way, and I hope they do.
I hope they do. I thought that on that Monday board meeting in April as well. I even posted an internet video that said, hey, this could be a very big day in the history of the NRA if the board does the right thing. Obviously, a lot of us feel they did not at all do the right thing, and we have concerns. I will say that I am less optimistic about this board meeting being positive than I was back in April. I think they've made it clear, as you said, they're tightening that circle of the wagons even closer and closer and closer. And I just feel like this is going to get worse before it gets better. But Save the Second is going to be represented. We will be up in Anchorage. We'll be in Alaska. We'll be at the board meeting for as long as they let us. Although we imagine that they're going to go into executive session pretty quick and kick us out. Which ought to be interesting to see on video. We'll make sure we share a lot of updates from up there as well.
Sure. Well, and if nothing else, you know what? There are annual meetings every year. Nashville is going to be pins and needles time if something hasn't changed by then within the board. But I one way or another, I honestly believe it's gonna.
It has to. I mean, it absolutely has to. And the question is it going to be gun owners that change it, or is it going to be, prosecutors and federal agencies and the anti-gunners that change it? And obviously, we hope for the former.
Exactly. Rob Pincus, I want to thank you for joining us again, man. The website, savethe2a.org.
Thanks.
And we are off recording. We are...